Tēnā tātai. Te mea nui i tēnei wā kauri ngā whakaaro ki te runga rawa. E tūwai ana mātou ana manaakitanga no reira e te atua e tūwane ki tō kamointu karori e kia koe. Tuarua mihi nui ki Atiawa. Ko koutou tūwai te whakatau i ama te timatango tēnei rā no reira mihi mai wakatau mai. Huri no ki te ore nei a koutou ko hui mai nei rongo te reo karanga te kaupapa tū mai tēnei wā. E ngā waka, e ngā reo, e ngā karangaranga maaka nui ngā mihi kia koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā uki tātou katoa. We've had some wonderful presentations today, and of course, like all the recent speakers, we're sort of doubling up a bit, aren't we? So what I'm going to do is really focus on the priorities that drive us as we face into our long-term future. What really is the role of trees in our future? As told in the Māori story of creation, as Melanie has reminded us, Tāne established the forest and its many layers to cover Papatūānuku, his mother, as she lay exposed to keep her warm in the cold and shaded in the heat of summer. Now that might sound like a fairy story, a myth, but it highlights a fundamental reality that we need to keep in mind as Aotearoa faces up to climate change. The main purpose of forests is to cover the whenua, the earth, to grow the soil and keep it in place, and to hold the water we need to survive, not to provide timber, store carbon, or create wealth. We need to keep this in mind in this conference. These are not ordinary times. The recent floods that have hit the country over the last few months, Nelson, North Auckland, Wellington, Marlborough, Dunedin, confront us and erode the fairy stories of those who claim that climate change is a myth. Look further afield, the news is even more graphic: the floods, the droughts, the fires. It's time to take a pause from our business planning and wealth creation and take a close look at the priorities that guide us, to make sure that they align with the realities that dominate us. It is looking to the future, not the next annual report, but the long-term future that should be our primary focus. We worry about the economy and look to the economic geniuses that continue to keep the world economy afloat, but are reluctant to adequately consider the realities that press down on us. We worry about the survival of our economy. We should be worrying about our survival, our very existence. Tāne's Tree Trust was started with a vision to persuade New Zealanders to consider growing native trees for the future instead of relying almost exclusively on exotic species to meet our future timber needs. In time, carbon became a major focus, and again, exotic species seemed more attractive. But with climate change, many other factors come into play. The focus of Tāne's Tree Trust has changed gradually. Instead of focusing on timber and timber values, the many benefits of native forests become more important, as Jackie was talking us about. A forest is more than a whole lot of trees storing carbon, producing timber. It is in fact a community of many species in an interconnected world that together gives many benefits. Oh, I'm meant to be using this thing, eh? So I'm a bit useless on these things. The main purpose of forests, which one is that one? Oh, yeah, is to cover the whenua, the earth, to grow soil and keep it in place. Oh, I said that. Okay, so the aim of Tāne's Tree Trust is to restore the cloak of Tāne, to reclothe Papatūānuku and with the many species that make a healthy forest community, to ensure that life can thrive. The big trees that we treasure so much, kauri, tōtara, rimu, the beeches and so on, are the umbrella to shade and protect the trees, the ferns, the plants that clothe Papatūānuku. That's where the real action happens. These understory plants are not there to provide food for animals, be they domestic or the wild animals that we hunt. Their main role is to cover the earth and keep her well. When the underforest is well and intact, the whenua can absorb the water that gives life to the network of life that we rely on. How much discussion is there about the importance of healthy forests in sustaining water supplies and sustaining the quality as we grapple with water management issues, 3 waters and the like. The key to managing water depends on the wellness of the land. We need to make sure that we are aware of the facts. Much of the forest in the North Island, both native and exotic, has so little undergrowth that the rain runs across almost bare ground straight into the streams and rivers and regularly floods its way to the coast, and we've seen photos of that in Anne's lovely presentation. Our exotic forests may be very efficient in accumulating carbon, but they are often devoid of sub-canopy vegetation compared to the healthy indigenous forests that they replaced. How much carbon is stored in the canopy compared to the understory and soils that should accumulate beneath them? Very little in too many cases. But in a healthy forest, there can be more carbon in the undergrowth and its soils than in the trees we measure and market for their carbon. Soil scientists have told us that the soils that can be the main carbon store, but we can't measure that, let alone market it and turn it into dollars, and therefore we discount it as unimportant. How much better would the situation be if our forests were allowed to grow back their undergrowth? Have we asked the economists to quantify that? And sometimes I joke, and forests these days are like Scotsmen. What does a Scotsman wear under their kilt? Most of our forests have got no underpants, So we are faced with multiple issues that continue to deteriorate, yet we continue to manipulate the landscape to maximise our capital gain. We feel that we are entitled to do that and that it's good for the economy for the sake of economic survival. Many of us have so much to say about the anti-vax protesters who protested over their perceived loss of freedom, but are we very much different? We claim the right to keep building our businesses even though we know that we are contributing to the collapse of the environment that we know we need to survive. If we want to survive, or better, if we want our children and the many generations that follow to survive, we need to step back, take a deep breath, and have a fresh look at what is happening around us. Oh, hang on, I think I might have missed one somewhere. Well, I don't know where I'm going here. That's a pretty good one to have up there anyway. One thing is certain, we will not find the answers to today's crises in the thinking that created them. We need a fresh start based on a different set of priorities to give us a chance to turn back the deterioration that increasingly threatens our future. We have to stop kidding ourselves. We have to admit that the way we have used and abused the earth over the last 10,000 years has pushed the whole ecosystem of the planet to the point of collapse. The planet, of course, will survive without us, but we may not be going when that happens. No doubt in telling each other that the development of new technology will give us the answers, but it's like buying electric cars to cut back on our reliance on fossil fuels and importing more coal to provide the extra electricity they need to run. Technology always takes more than it gives, no matter how sophisticated it might be, and does little to dampen our demand for more ease and comfort, even as life becomes less certain. At the end of the day, the economy of our country doesn't depend on our dairy herds, our exotic forests, and our horticulture. It depends on the climate and the quality of our soils, the water, and our rivers and lands. Taking care of them must be the first priority. That's why forests are so important. When it comes to looking at our options for the future, it's not a matter of trying to gauge the potential economic impact of our businesses, but of considering what is the long-term impact on the planet and its resources. If we take more than we give back, we are using up other people's futures, our descendants. That applies to forestry. It's not about how much carbon a forest can store, but how can a forest contribute to the well-being of the environment. Already we are talking about forests that are never likely to be harvested, which is good. But are we prepared to make the investment to make sure those forests are well? Should we start to measure the health of the undergrowth, the subcanopy, because that's what ensures the landscape is benefiting. And that means pest control, weed control, and the cost that incurs. Well, I've already said that. Okay. We can summarise this by a simple Māori saying, ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. When the land is well, people are well. Our well-being depends on the wellness of the earth. So caring for the earth is the first priority. There are no exceptions. The second great delusion that we need to face up to is this: we are not the masters. We think we're the masters of the universe. We think we are entitled to the earth resources for our own benefit. Our rights overrule the rights of all other creatures, even the planet itself. That might sound a bit stark, but we are well used to acting as if it were true. We keep claiming our rights, our freedom, our entitlements. We are like the emperor with no clothes. It's about time we woke up and saw things as they really are. As a species, we are unique and incredible in so many ways, yet we are totally dependent on the network of life. We are so great that even a tiny microbe can bowl us over, as COVID has reminded us. We live in the age of fake news. Donald Trump might epitomise that with his magic wand of deception that has misled tens of millions of people. But we happily live with the delusion of our entitlement. Māori see it much better, as do most traditional peoples. According to their way of seeing things, we are the youngest of Tāne's children. All other living beings are tuakana, senior to us. And they know that when the taina, the junior, oversteps the tuakana, disruption follows. Isn't that the current state of the planet's environment? We can go one step further. Māori focused on the interconnectedness of all living beings, not on the individual species that make up an ecosystem. A forest is not measured by the size, quantity and quality of the economically important species, but by the network of species that enables that forest to stand. That's where Māori is so important. Māori has become one of the N-words. It's so important. It finds its way into all sorts of places. It is often defined as a life principle or words to that effect, but that only reflects a shadow of what it really means. We need to remember that the Māori is found in the connections that enable life to thrive. When the connections are strong, the Māori is alive. If those connections are weak or damaged, the Māori is weak. It can start to fade and things can start to fall to pieces. That's what happens to a river when the shade that protects its water is taken away. Our role is to care for the connections that enable life to thrive, because we are the youngest of Tāne's children. It may seem like an insignificant role, even demeaning when we consider the great things we are capable of and have done over the centuries, but in actual fact, it is the key to our continued existence. And what can be more important than that? And all our planning and working to provide for ourselves and the things that are important to us, we must always keep an eye on the big picture. We exist because of the interconnected world we are part of. It is in our interest to make our first priority to sustain those connections to ensure our future. But that means we need to get over ourselves. The special privileges that we claim as the top of the evolutionary table has put us on an inevitable confrontation with extinction. We need to back off and accept that we are part of the network of life, not outside of it, as sometimes our way of living would suggest. And we are certainly not the bosses. We need that network to survive. and therefore caring for it is our top priority as our pathway to the future. And finally, we must take one more step. All life depends on microbes. The many microscopic organisms are the foundation of the chain of life. This is because this is better understood, yet so much of what we do suppresses them, even in the forestry industry. The repeated use of herbicides to suppress weed growth in new plantings, for instance, not only extinguishes the seed bank in the soil that would enable that landscape to recover after a major event like a fire or a flood, or simply abandonment of a site because it's no longer viable to replant, but it also suppresses invertebrates and microorganisms in the soil that are vital for trees' growth and their resistance to disease. That doesn't mean we don't plant trees for timber, for carbon, for their fruits, or to beautify the landscapes where we make our homes, but we don't let our needs and wants dominate the wider responsibility to care for the earth and the interconnected world of life to the extent that we do lasting damage to it. We need to work within boundaries in order to sustain the life of the planet, not just our own. We need to do that to ensure our long-term survival. For too long, we have kept taking from the planet's resources as if they were inexhaustible. They are not. What we are doing is using our children's future. We know that, yet we look at the way we manage our country, objecting strongly and often successfully to any measures that might inhibit our rights to grow our businesses and wealth. Look at the failure of the Resource Management Act. So we need to take note of the final words in this little book that we've been sharing around the country, little Tiwai Waka book. And the words that came in a flash of vision that only lasted for a moment, as if the Papatūānuku was talking to us. Care for me so that I can care for you, my children. Ignore me, forget that I need to be well, need you to care for me, to help me to be well, and I will not be able to care for you much longer. Too long have you taken much and given little. Soon I will not have enough to give, and you will struggle to survive. The struggle to get what you need will lead to a war more devastating than any that you have seen before. Now is the time to listen to my voice. It is urgent. Listen and take action. The 6 principles in the Tiwai Waka will guide you. I know you can't read that, but this is a summary of them. And it's the basis of this presentation. It might sound a bit fanciful, but what's happening in Ukraine isn't fanciful. Or the Chinese expansion into the Pacific, nor climate change, nor global pollution, and then there's a growing struggle for resources. Look at the price of diesel. We need to set a new set of priorities that guide the way we live and the way we manage our businesses as we reach into the future. We're not going to find the answers in today's issues and the thinking that created them. We need a new start based on a different set of priorities, and that's what Tiwai Waka offers. A new set of priorities, a pathway into a more certain future, a pathway that gives hope. Caring for the earth is the first priority. There are no exceptions. We are not the masters of the creation, but part of the family, the interconnected network that enables life to flourish. Our spiritual role is to care for the connections that enable life to thrive, to care for the mauri. That includes the tiniest living creatures. Even though they are so small we can't see them, they are the foundation of life. All that means is we have to get over ourselves. That sense of entitlement and privilege that so dominates our present world is a luxury we can no longer afford. Our future depends not on our creativity and our entrepreneurial skills, but on our ability to work together, not just with ourselves, people, but for the whole network of life. We all need each other. That all remains a dream unless somebody takes the lead. We need practical, down-to-earth people who know how to lead and to work hard to achieve goals. So why shouldn't it be the forestry sector? The New Zealand forest industry is a testament to Kiwis' ability to make things happen. So now that we know how to grow Pinus radiata better than anybody else, it's time to put our minds to a much bigger challenge, ensuring our future. We are the ones who know how to restore the cloak of Tāne, putting trees back into our landscape so that our country can start to recover. The Tāne's Tree Trust Conference in 1999 was titled Native Trees for the Future. Forestry has a critical role as Aotearoa works to combat climate change. The key lies not with the big trees that we know most about, but especially with the multiplicity of species that make up the forest community. We can't just leave caring for native trees to dock. The whole forestry sector needs to embrace the concept that a healthy, diverse forest is critical to our future, and that the first purpose of forests is not to produce timber or store carbon, but to care for the whenua. That needs to be the starting point when it comes to business planning. That way, businesses will prioritise planning for the future, not the interest of owners and shareholders. Native Trees for the Future. That title has proved to be prophetic. Trees are our key to our future. We need them to cover Papatūānuku so that all the life that she embraces can thrive. Care for them, our tuakana, and we too can thrive. Ka ora te whenua, ka ora te tangata. Kia ora tātou.